entrepreneurs think that the biggest threat to their business is the competitor that lives across the street. But the truth is, there are five invisible forces that quietly decide whether you're going to thrive or die. And if you ignore them, your business is already at risk. So in this video, I'm going to break down the five forces in plain English, show you real examples, and teach you how to use them to actually outsmart your competition. Let's get into it. A couple years ago, I watched a promising company go bankrupt. Not because their product was bad, but because they misunderstood how their industry really worked. And a lot of people get the misconception that strategy is about competing against other companies. But strategy isn't about copying rivals. It's about understanding the industry dynamics. That's what's most important. So think about your business as if it's a boat in the ocean. Most people watch the waves, but in reality, it's the current underneath the waves that actually get you off course. So remember that analogy as we go through these five forces. So force number one, the rivalry among competitors. So you have to understand how crowded the market is and how fierce your competition is. Because if you were trying to start the next Facebook, you have to look at the competitors and think, well, they can absolutely crush you. But you also could see a new flourishing industry like AI and understand that there's not a company right now that's big enough to crush you before you start. So the market may be crowded, but you do have the leverage to being somebody that provides real value and service inside of that industry. So you have to understand your market conditions and the competitors that are inside of it before you jump headfirst into the industry. But if you are in a high competitor industry, you still can succeed. You just have to either differentiate yourself or out-operate. That's the only two ways that you're going to become successful in a high competitor industry. And people have done it all the time. Look at a company like Chick-fil-A. There was already McDonald's and Wendy's and all these fast food restaurants, but when they came to the market, they absolutely dominated and scaled so much faster because they out-operated their competition. So it's still doable, but you do have to understand that force. And force number two is the threat to new people that are entering the market. So you have to ask yourself is how easy is it to enter an industry? And going back to the example earlier, if you were trying to enter the social media industry, it's very hard to get your foot in the ground because people are so used to using the platforms that are already there. But if you're getting into an industry like AI or software, maybe a service business, then you may have more momentum in the beginning because there's not that huge uphill battle for a new company getting into the industry. So another example is the low-cost airlines that are disrupting some of the biggest players. Now, airlines in a whole is a hard industry to get into, but there are low-cost airlines that are coming in, and because they're doing it at a low cost, they're actually dominating. So you have to understand the threat to new entries. Now, force number three, the threat to substitutes. You have to ask yourself what other solutions are out there now or that are going to come in the next couple years that can replace you. One of the biggest things that we've seen now is AI. AI is replacing a lot of industries that have been around for a very long time, and it's going to continue to do so if people are evolving and innovating. So another example is energy drinks versus coffee. Coffee was dominant. They owned almost 100% of the market share because everyone wanted caffeine, but there was no alternative. Then energy drinks hit the market and they absolutely dominated. So you have to ask yourself the question of what could possibly replace you in the future and how are you going to innovate in order to stay on top of that? Now, force number four, the bargaining power of buyers. This one is very important. You have to understand how much leverage your customers have. Not how much leverage you have as a business, but how much leverage your customers have. This is where you see a massive fight in the price wars. If a customer can go to another product for a lower price that gives exactly what your company provides, now your customers have leverage against you. So the only way to counteract that leverage is to either lower your prices, which some companies can't afford to do, or operate with more value that you provide a customer. You don't want your customers to have leverage. Imagine if you were selling a car. If they could go and buy the exact same car with the exact same specs at another dealership for lower than what you're selling it, how would you compete with that? You would have to either increase the value, decrease the price, or sell them a little bit better. So out operate to make sure that your customers don't have all the power in the relationship. Now, force number 5 is the bargaining power of suppliers, where you get your products. This one is also very important because your suppliers is what makes your margin. If you have to spend more to supply the same product, you're losing out on profit in your business. Because even if you look at the airline industry, the ones that really control the airline industry are the people that produce the aircrafts. So the suppliers have a lot of leverage and they can increase or decrease their prices basically at will because the company is dependent on the supplier. So if you're starting out a company, you need to make sure that you are not dependent on the supplier. Because if the supplier gets offered more money from a competitor, there goes your business. So you want to make sure that you have either a good relationship or that you can supply more quantity and give them more value than if a competitor were to just swoop in and take that supplier. So 3 questions that you need to ask yourself right now. The first question is, which of these forces are the strongest in my industry? Ask yourself that question. The next question is, how can I reduce the impact of that force? Another great question to ask. And number 3 is, what weaknesses can I spot from competitors in my industry? Now, a big example of this is BlackBerry versus Apple. BlackBerry was a dominant company in the industry of cell phones, but Apple identified the weaknesses of BlackBerry and capitalized on it, and now BlackBerry is bankrupt. So you have to ask yourself these questions when you're a business operator. And some of the most common mistakes that I see when people are explained these 5 forces is number 1 is assuming that competition only means direct competitors. It doesn't. It has a lot of industry factors or new technology that may not be your direct competitor, but could replace what you're doing. Energy drinks, coffee. Mistake 2 is ignoring substitutes. Same analogy, energy drinks and coffee. If you ignore the substitutes that could come into your industry, then you're being blinded by what actually is going to happen. And mistake number 3 is underestimating newcomers in the industry. Because just like Chick-fil-A, when they came to the market, there was already so much fast food, but they became dominant because they out-operated the competition. And the competition underestimated them. So go ahead and comment below which force is the one that's hurting you the most, and how are you going to adapt to that force in order to give yourself the competitive advantage. And if you found this video valuable, make sure to hit subscribe on the channel. We are filled with practical insights that you can utilize. And as always, we're not here to sell you some course or some $25,000 mastermind. We're here to give you real insights that actually have worked for me, and hopefully they work for you. We'll see you in the next video.